All right. Good afternoon, everyone. One thing I want to say before I speak about it, the session around 12:30 about the resiliency. If you haven't attended that one, make sure you do. Make sure you do that because there was a lot of useful information that I'm probably going to repeat over here. But before I go into the presentation of what I'm going to talk about, because this is a history lesson, this is less about resiliency or anything else. This is the history lesson of how we came about where we are today. So think about it. This room at this point of time is a time machine for you all. All right, your chairs are where you are supposed to be. Now go 170 years back from where we are today. If you come back, what would be the case right now? Does anybody want to try that? Or I'll tell you. Obviously, you're going to be hanging in the air, so let's just get on the floor. And remember one thing, 170 years ago, this part of the state wasn't touched on. It was all natural, and you'll see this. This is one of the, if you are an engineering nerd like me, you will, the plan that I'm showing you right now, it's one of the best surveying that was done back in 1856. This was the first engineering survey for entire state of Florida. Before that, if you had seen anything surveyed before this, they used to show Florida as a triangle, which was not the case. This was one of the best that was developed. But anyhow, before humans, when nature was doing its own water management, I hope this is working. Okay, well, all right, so basically, on the left side, you have the plan. So basically, the Kissimmee or the Disney parking lots that you all know, that used to be something called upper chain of lakes. Water basically used to rain. When it rained, it would overflow and go into Kissimmee River. And Kissimmee River used to be a meandering river that used to go all the way from Kissimmee up to Okeechobee. And from Okeechobee, it used to overflow again in something called Everglades. The Everglades that you and all see here today is not the same thing that used to be before. If you notice just where that the shape is, the blob in the middle, that used to be the lake Okeechobee. So from there, we used to have a river that used to be 60 to 80 mile wide. Normally, rivers, you don't speak in that kind of dimensions, and used to be 100 miles long. But obviously, this is what nature used to manage. This is how the nature used to manage the water sources. So when the settlers started to move in Florida, obviously there were no rail tracks, there were no roads. If you knew anything about the geology of that time, we had Atlantic Ridge on the east coast, and we had a West Ridge. That's all we had. So that's all where people can sit and settle. That's all it we have. So the first real effort where human being decided to use water for transportation. So in Florida, the system that you see started as a navigation project. Obviously, what navigation showed people was, hey, around the lake, there is a very good soil that you can use for your farming. And starting 1880s up to 1920s, there was a rush to tame this wild land. They used to call it wild. The Everglades that today we love, cherish, care today so much, that was not the thing back in 1920 or 1900s. It was a different thing. It was a swamp. We need to drain the swamp. That was the rallying cry. So obviously, when you have that idea of what you're doing with your environment, the idea is drain the swamp. So state, at that point of it was state who was responsible for it. They came up with idea how to disconnect Lake Okeechobee from the Everglades or River of Grass. They literally decided to build 6 canals. Thankfully, they did not do all of it. They only built 4 of it, and these canals still exist. They are still bringing the water from Lake Okeechobee and moving it to the east coast. So this was the idea, and imagine when this is done by us, nature does comes back. So we had couple major hurricanes, 1926 and 1928. 1928 hurricane is considered one of the most tragic hurricane in United States history, because this is where most of the life was lost to an environmental catastrophe. That was the case. So almost 2,500 people died. Still in the history, this is the largest we have. But that told the federal government and state government, remember, this state government at that point of time, Florida had just become the part of the federal government at that point of United States. So they were obviously financially not in the shape to deal with all these kind of monstrosities that were hitting Florida. And again, hurricane at that point of time, people started to realize how dangerous they are, not just for the people, but even for the property damage and everything else that was leading to. So from 1930 all the way up to 1938, federal government realized that we need to do something else. So they came up with an idea of putting a levee around the Lake Okeechobee. So they built almost 60 miles of levee on the south of the lake and around 15 miles. But again, nature has ways to come back to you. The moment we started building this levee, nature said, you know what, let me teach you another lesson. So nature gave you a drought of almost 15 years. Now, the drought in Florida doesn't mean you don't get a rain. Drought in Florida means if our average rainfall is 50 to 60 inches, you may get 20, 30, or 40 inches. So there was a long duration of drought in Florida. What that led to is all the soil around the lake that was drained out with these drainage systems, they became dry and they started burning. So we started to have peat fire. And that is when everybody realized we cannot play with nature. We can design and build everything, but we got to work with nature. And at that point of time, federal government with state government, they said, okay, we need to plan for this thing. And we came with the Flood Control Act of 1936. This is when everybody realized we need to do something. But again, in the world of politics, planning, and everything else, it takes time. This idea was approved in 1936, and we were waiting all the way up to 1948 for anything to actually happen on the ground. And you may ask why it happened only in 1948. It's because in 1947, something happened, which again, if you are a history buff of Florida, you will know this. In 1947, the wet season of 1947, we have a rain that we have never seen. Entire East Coast, all the way from Palm Beach County up to Miami-Dade, we had over 100 inches of rain. Now imagine this. Normally you are getting 50, 60 inches of rain and your system is already gets saturated right away. Imagine about getting 100 inches of rain. As I said, there was so much life and property loss. It took almost 2 to 3 months for this water to get out into the sea. The places where you can normally drive, there was 5 to 6 feet of water. Animals, you see the photograph at the bottom? That was the report that state generated. This is an actual photograph somebody took that was converted into this graphic or a cartoon that was converted. But this was the real thing. Hundreds and thousands of animals died. People obviously died. So this was what led to the system that we all love, cherish, and care today about is CNSF system, which is Central and Southern Florida Flood Control District. What you have is basically more than 5,000 miles of levee and canal, almost 90 pump stations, hundreds of structure that make sure that we all are here today. We are able to, again, enjoy the life that we are enjoying because we have this CNSF system that was built to make sure that this kind of exercise can be practiced. So it took almost, after the plan that was approved in 1948, it took almost 20 years for this whole system to go. And I'm not going to blame the people who were planning for this project at that point of time because they had the information they had. Their idea was simple. We need to tame the water. Again, remember the theme that had. We need to tame the water. That's the idea that they had for a very long time. So we started working whereby all the rivers, none of these rivers except the Kissimmee River, neither the Caloosahatchee on the west or the St. Lucie on the east, none of these rivers were ever connected to the lake, but they were all connected. Why? Because we wanted to make sure people have land to farm and live. The EA, that the area that is the second red line on the bottom, basically disconnected the whole Everglades from the lake. Why? Because this is the area where you get all your sugarcane. This is the sugarcane capital of the world. And the thing that probably impacted the Everglades most was this red line that goes north to south. This is the Everglades Protection Levee. This is pretty much what protects where we are today and Everglades. Basically, the planners or the designers of the time said, okay, let's split the Everglades into two. We're gonna reclaim the half for people to live, to farm, to have a life, and other half is going to be where we're gonna keep water. Why? Because we still need that water for our aquifers, because how are we gonna get the drinking water we need? So that was the decision made. It's a great plan. Again, from engineering point of view, if I'm in 1940s and 50s, this is a great plan. It worked and it is still working. Some of you are in the roadway design. You design your roadway within 5 years, 6 years, it's already saturated. This system has been going on for last 70 years, and we haven't had a major improvement to this system. We started improving this system in 2000. That's when we started improving the system. So as I said, this system has been doing what we intended to, but there were some unintended consequences of what was the plan and what actually happened. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But there were 3 major flaws with this design. And I would not call it flaw, but you have to call it the decision-making that has based on the history or the data of that point of time. The first flaw was obviously that when we were designing this system, and again, I'm talking about the people who are designing at that point of time, they made an assumption there are going to be 2 million people living in South Florida. And somebody in the morning told me we have 3.7 million just in Miami. Think about this system was designed for 2 million people. Second, the assumption was, you know what? Almost of all the area that is reclaimed, only 10-15% of the area is going to be where people are going to live. Guess what? 90% of people living and only 10% is for farming. That's a second major, I wouldn't call it again flaw, but that was the assumption that was made. And the third was, which they did not know, and obviously I would not know at that point of time, is the sea level rise or climate change. I think the session that happened around 12, it dig into deeper quite a lot. But again, people did not know. So we designed the system assuming that nothing is going to change. Guess what? Obviously, climate change is happening, and you will see how that is impacting the system we have today. These are some of this is Broward County, just north of the Fort Lauderdale Airport. Only this much area was assumed, that this is all we're going to have as far as the people living. You can see what's the reality today. Same thing on the bottom. This is the southern part of the Miami-Dade County. It was assumed everything is going to be farmlands. Obviously, none of that is farmland anymore. All right. The other, and this was unintended consequence, this was not a design mistake that was made. The unintended consequences of the CNSF system was, the CNSF system was designed for human. The planner, the modeler, the policymakers completely forgot about one of the major component of Florida, who was there before we came in. That was the environment, water, land, animal, all that. They all forgot. And guess what happened? Right after CNSF system was completed around 1970s, in 1965, there was a major drought and almost 90% of alligator population in South Florida died. And next year, there was a major rain event, almost half of the fur-bearing animal died. So there was this imbalance, which was perfect for a human being because we are able to live and recreate, but the animals started to suffer. And this obviously got recognized at all the upper echelon of governments at that point of time, and there was a plan that was built, was called SERP, which is Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Project. It took 30 years from CNSF to SERP, 30 years. That's how long it took for people to figure it out. So right now, I don't know how many you have gone on that side of the state or not, but we are building some of the largest water resources project anywhere in the world. This SERP project, it's an almost $30 billion project, the largest environmental restoration project anywhere in the world. Some of the projects like the EA reservoir is the largest reservoir east of Mississippi. We have C42, C43. The amount of water that is going to stored between those two, C43 and 44, you can stack entire city of Miami with almost 20 feet of water. That's how much storage you have in those two reservoirs. So there is a lot of work that is going on whereby we are trying to fix something was broken. This is, the middle is what we have today. Because what we did was we stopped the flow of water from Lake Okeechobee to Florida Bay. And again, if you're a Floridian, you know this, how much we care about Florida Bay. So the idea is this SERP, which we are working on, we are more than half of the project is done, is going to give us a hybrid system. Obviously, we cannot go to what was in 1850, but hopefully we will get to something whereby we can start sending more water to Everglades National Park and Taylor Slough and all those places. All right, this was the thing again with the unintended consequences of the SERP. Now there is another thing that is still a problem, and I hope this will help you. This is a problem that is lurking at us, not very far, it's very close, it's getting closer and closer. This is one of our coastal structures just 10 miles north from here. It's called S28 structure. It's not like there is anything wrong with if the water is flowing over our structure. There's nothing wrong with it. The only problem in this video is water is flowing in the wrong direction. Water is actually coming from the sea to the inland side. What is the problem with that? Because the CNSF system never assumed the seas are going to go up. So the gates and everything were designed to up to elevation so they can take the high tide. Well, sea levels are going up, high tides are adding up, and water, these structures that were built for the these structures that were built for just simply taking the water out of gravity cannot do it anymore. Now, what this does to our system, the CNSF system, is it adds to the problem. It compounds everything else. You all talked about, and there is going to be another session on stormwater management. There is erosion. There was somebody brought up about the issue of the erosion, the coastal erosion. All these things are going to compound because of the sea level rise, because of the climate change issue. And the sea level rise is, as I said, it's a symptom. There are other things that you are already seeing in the entire system that we have right now. For example, so this is the level of service. Somebody in the previous session talked about level of service. Basically, level of service is what we make an assumption when we are designing a basin that, okay, you are going to have a flooding every 5 years or 50 years or 100 years. So most of the CNSF system, it was assumed that you are going to have a flooding once every 50 years. Right now, I don't know if you can see in the bottom, the red, we are already seeing flooding every 5 years, less than 5 years. And this area specifically, I don't know if you can see, there is a red dot. This is the C4 basin. Somebody was talking about the daylight flooding or sunny day flooding. That's what it is. Your basin is already not meeting the design, what it was designed for. That's why it keeps flooding, because the sea levels are going up and the infrastructure we have is not ready for that. So what are we going to do about that? The first thing we are doing at Water Management District is we are collecting enough data. We have been collecting data on rain. We have looking at how the trends are changing on the rain. As you all know, the rains are becoming more intensive. They are becoming more spatially different places. They are not like it's evenly distributed anymore. We are also noticing, and this is not an unknown fact anymore. I don't think there is any denial on the fact the sea levels are rising, because this is our own data that shows the sea levels from 1980 to now has gone up by 6 inches on one of the tidal structures. So this is not an unknown anymore for us. And we are also seeing what is happening with the sea level rise is the impact it's happening to our drinking water. This is the intrusion of chlorine in our drinking water. It's already happening, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to have a very negative impact to our environment. So what are we doing? And that's why I was saying that the previous session, if you haven't done, please attend that, because there were some good discussions on the what are each community doing. And this is where our whole system comes in. We are responsible for primary system. And let me tell you this, when CNSF system was built, there were only two parties. One was federal government and state. Counties were still in very early stages at that point of time. And there was no limit of how much land you need. But guess what is happening right now? Just a basin north of where we are, there is less than 0.55% of open land available. So we cannot just build more canals, more pump stations, more structures. No, we need to work with the stakeholder, which is each city, special district, HOA, individual homeowners. We have to work with everyone, and that's what district is doing. For last 5 years, we have been working on how to bring all these stakeholders. And this is not the work that we are doing. We are actually working with all the counties, all the cities, and some of the major special districts also. And this is the chart of all the different programs that are going on. But if I talk about from the resiliency, restoration, environmental restoration, all that, there are basically three baskets of the project that are ongoing. So you heard about the SERP, which is how we manage the water in the system better so that it should not go to the sea. That is the one system. The second one is, I think in the discussion, it was like a back-based study. That is how to stop the water from coming from sea to inland. There is also 216 study that CORE has taken on, and there are almost 200 stakeholders on that study. That is also, again, making sure how can we improve the CNSF system. Those are the two major things. And the third bucket of the project is the existing CNSF system we have right now, how we can work with it. What do you mean by work with it? Obviously, the existing structures don't have the capability anymore to move the water out. All right, so what can you do about it? These are what we call no regret strategies. We know these structures were designed to move water. They cannot move. The solution is 4 pump stations. The solution is more seawall. Yes, I think somebody said seawalls, nobody likes those, but that is going to be solution. The solution is that all the infrastructure district is building, FDOT is building, Army Corps is building. We need to make sure they all interact with each other. When we build this system, there is a golf course around it. All right, this is S28 pump station. Now, when the water goes up, when we have a high tide, water just goes around the structure because the golf course is pretty low. So now you cannot just build infrastructure just thinking one idea that we just need to drain the water out. So there are a lot of things. And to make this all happen, there is one very important stakeholder that we need to have, and luckily we have that, and that is our state legislature and executive. If you are following the budget right now, this year alone, district has allocated $1.1 billion for environmental restoration, $150 million for resiliency. These are major numbers, and these are the things that are going to make dent on our CNSF system that will make sure that you and I can keep living in this South Florida and enjoy and call it home. Thank you.